It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. You could find me at Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting if you go to my website, emailrevealer.com, or just if you email me at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com. And if you go to Spreaker.com and you Google Ron Chepesiuk, our guest previously, we had him on previously, mostly about some controversy about the around the Jeffrey Epstein tapes, but we have him back. The guy's got a lot going on. You go to ronchepesiuk.com to check out. He's got a radio show every Thursday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, Crime Beat with Ron Chepesiuk. It's at artistfirst.com. You could find it there. Brand new book. The guy's got like 20 books, 50 books, who knows. But the brand new book sounds fascinating. Bad Henry, The Murderous Rampage of the Taco Bell Strangler. And he's got a TV series right now. You can catch it right now if you subscribe to VIX, V-I-X, Periso Blanco. It's a Spanish station. It's a TV series. It's about Carlos Later, the notorious drug smuggler. And I just found out they just let him out of prison talking about Ron Chepesiuk. Ron Chepesiuk, are you there?
Yes, sir. I'm here.
Hey, man. Thank you so much for coming back.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Remind the audience, who is Ron Chepesiuk?
Who is Ron Chepesiuk? Okay. I'm a writer, I guess, freelance writer, screenwriter, producer, director, and I have a publishing company, streetcommunitybooks.com, and I'm a former professor of library science in a university in South Carolina, and I've been freelancing full-time for about 20 years. I've published about 42 books and about 4,000 magazine, newspaper, and internet articles. And I've got about 6 or 7, I have to look at it again, 6 or 7 scripts optioned. And about 4 of them are in development right now, various stages of development. And I lucked out. I got this option on my Carlos Later book from Caracol TV network in Colombia, South America, and they optioned it, and they did a great job, and they produced a 30-part TV series on that, and I'm busier than hell, and I appreciate being here on the show.
Yeah, I was going to say 42 books. You must be writing notes as we talk, right?
Well, I was thinking about that today, and I said, I didn't write my first book till I was 35.
Yeah.
And so it's been more than like a book a year, and since then, and I was mainly a magazine writer, and actually you can make more money writing magazine articles than you can writing books. But then I decided I wanted to freelance full time, and I did a book on gangsters of Harlem, and this turned me into a crime writer, and I got all these ideas for books, and I started producing crime books, and I ended up on radio talking on various the ID channel, Investigative Discovery, Discovery Channel, Biography, History, and Black Entertainment Network, and so I developed this reputation, and once you get the reputation, you pretty well have to stick with it because that's what you're known for.
Gangsters of Harlem. Ron Chepesiuk doesn't know this, but my former partner, Bobby Harris Sr., was the cop who arrested Nicky Barnes for bribery.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Right there. Yeah, it's a small world, right?
Yeah, he's profiled in my book, of course.
I'm sure, yeah.
On that, and it's an interesting, he's an interesting guy. He's dead now.
Yeah.
But it took several years before they found out that he was dead because he was in a witness protection program on that, but he passed away a couple of years ago.
Have you ever heard the recording of him negotiating with the SDNY about wanting his partners were supposed to be doing things for him, but they were doing things against him, and he wanted he wanted revenge against them?
Yeah, he got revenge because of his wife. She was messing around with one of the guys, and he was in prison, and he thought disloyalty was a bad thing, and so he turned against him, became a snitch, and a really big snitch too.
Yeah, shortly after that call, 2 white guys went in there and killed his enemies. Any idea what happened there?
Yeah. That's right.
RonChepesiuk.com. Okay, tell us about Bad Henry, the murderous rampage of the Taco Bell Strangler. Now, was he actually strangling them with tacos?
No. He worked in fast food industry, and he several of his victims worked with him in the Taco Bell, the restaurant, the Mexican fast food restaurant. And so the press, of course, always looking for gimmicky nicknames, and they gave him the nickname of the Taco Bell Strangler. So that's how I got the title on that. And Bad Henry, that's what he called himself, Bad Henry, in a quote on that. And so I put that together, and I got my title.
Henry Louis Wallace. Okay, tell us, who was this guy? Tell us about this guy.
Well, he was born in 1965 in November 4th in Barnwell, South Carolina, and it's a little town, about 6,000 people, half black, half white, in South Carolina, and he was very interesting. I interviewed people that knew him, and they were shocked to find out that he was a serial killer, because he had this sort of double life. He lived in this really poor, absolutely poor. There was no indoor plumbing at all, and he had to carry out a bucket of excrement every day that the family made. And he had a sister, Yvonne, and he had a mother, Lottie Mae, and she was a very nasty woman. She didn't have much success with men. She didn't like her life, and she took it out on her kids. She beat them, called them weird names, dressed up Henry in a woman's, a young girl's outfit, and had him parade through the neighborhood. The neighborhood was kind of bad too, because he was molested when he was young by some of the young girls, and he developed this really intense subliminal hatred of women, and it came out later on when he would kill these women on that sort of thing. But he went to school, and he belonged to the 4-H council. He was a cheerleader on the school. I talked to one of the cheerleaders that knew him, and she was shocked that he was a serial killer. She said he was the nicest guy. He would listen to their problems. He would talk with them. He drove the school bus, and his grades are pretty good. And then he'd go home to this secondary life, and nobody knew that he was living this, sort of double life. Abject poverty, and then a normal high school existence.
You mentioned the poverty in North Carolina. People have no idea, man. I took some trips through the Blue Ridge Parkway, and I saw parts of North Carolina and West Virginia, all that.
Yeah.
Man, some of these places, you can't, the whole town's on meth, in some of these towns.
Yeah, right. Economically, the South's always been poorer than the rest of the country, but if you were black, it's even worse.
Yeah, some of these towns are just incredible. So, and you just said that he was molested by the neighborhood girls. Yeah.
When he was, like 4 years old, this girl, about 7, put herself on top of his body. I don't know if she knew what she was even doing, but he told us later to a psych counselor when he was arrested and all that sort of stuff. This all came out on that. But anyways, it was a very subliminal, troubled history that he was living. And his mother would dress him up as a girl and make him walk up and down the street? Yeah. As a punishment? Right. And then she would beat him regularly. She would call him names, and she was tired. She'd have his sister and him beat each other up.
Oh my God!
On that then, but he had this strange attraction to her. He was really
to his sister,
devoted to her, sort of devoted to her, and she would follow him all over the place. He was supposed to have had a relationship with a girl in Charleston, South Carolina, and she found out, and she wanted to find out who the girl was. She's going to tell him to stay away from my boy, and all that. So he grew up, very troubled, and of course this is all hidden, from the public, and they all thought he was a nice guy. He's a really, really good-natured, friendly, sympathetic guy that listened to your problems, and they didn't know the difference. And
hey, real quick, what age was he when they were dressing him up and making him walk up and down the street?
Oh, he was he was probably in his early teens.
Really? Because I'm looking at his age. He was born in 65. I was born in 62. So I'm only a little bit older than this guy. And I can't imagine, at that time, in my teen years, that the parents were still doing that kind of abuse to their kids. It was more common.
Like I said, she had bad relations with men, and she took it out on her kids. And she worked in a textile mill, and made barely enough money to make ends meet. And they lived in just a small little shack with no indoor plumbing. Can you imagine that?
Oh, yeah.
And he had to carry the excrement out every day.
Yeah, I saw them. I saw those houses. And some of these places, there's garbage, trash strewn all over their front lawns. And this is how they live.
Exactly.
Now,
right.
Did he have brothers and sisters?
Yeah, he had a sister. Yvonne. And they got along okay, and they both suffered abuse at the hands of Lottie Mae, the mother.
Now, when he started these murders, how old was he when he started doing these killings?
Well, he started the murders in the first murder was committed in 1990, and on that then, so he was 26, 25, 26 years old, and what happened was he had this thing for this young girl, and her name was Tanisha Bethea, and he would see her, talk with her. She was a little bit younger than him. Henry's mother worked with Tanisha's mother in the textile factory, and one day she agreed to go with him, and he took her out to the lake, and he put the make on her, and she got upset, and she threatened to turn him in, and then she saw the expression on his face, and she sort of tried to renege her threat, and but it was too late. He ended up strangling her and dumping her body in the lake. And it was really really clumsy effort because he was one of the last people seen with her, and the cops caught on to him. I mean, they had him as a suspect from very early on after the murder. I talked with a couple of police that were investigating him, and they said that they knew he did it, but they couldn't prove it on that sort of thing. And at that time, his life was falling apart. He had married a woman in 1985, and his marriage was falling apart. He got arrested for breaking into the radio station where he was working. He was a disc jockey, pretty good one, from what I understand, on that sort of stuff. And so he decided to get out of Dodge, and he left. And of course, the cops couldn't hold him because he never had anything to hold him on. And so he ended up in Rock Hill, my city, right here where I live, Rock Hill, South Carolina. And he got into trouble here. He was accused of sexual abuse with a woman, and again he moved to Charlotte, where he settled down on that. And he always seemed to sense when trouble was moving in on him, and he would move. He did that in the military. He had joined the military in the late 80s, and he had gotten into trouble there, and actually ended up in probation for breaking into a hardware store on that sort of stuff. But he got out of the Navy and actually got a good commendation from the Navy, which was really amazing, given his criminal record on that. So he ended up in Charlotte, and then the first murder that he did was sort of atypical. He picked up this prostitute, Sharon Nance, and she demanded money for her services, and it made him ballistic. He went off the deep end, and he ended up strangling her. And the police found the body, but there was no connection at all. I mean, she was a prostitute, and she had several Johns and all that, so they couldn't do anything. And the police at that time were very, very overworked. They were criticized for their way they handled the Bad Henry investigation, but there was only like seven detectives handling homicide cases, and in 1993. It was the biggest number of murders in Charlotte history, with 129, and so they all each had like several cases each, and they didn't really talk to each other, so they didn't know what each other was doing, and Sharon Nance just became another statistic. and so that encouraged him. And from there, he went on to a killing spree that lasted from I guess about March '92 May '92 to about March the 12th, 1994.
And pretty much during that period of time, was he a suspect by the cops during that period?
No. I mean, he would end up killing a woman, and he would go home because he thought it would make the news. It never even made the news, and so that encouraged him. I mean, he got more bold. Now, the problem with him was he was a dope fiend, and he had gotten into cocaine and marijuana in the military. And at this time, crack was spreading across the U.S., right? And it hit Charlotte, and he got into crack. And that, I think, was the real reason for his demise. He got really careless. He was very, very smart. His IQ was a little above average, but he got really smart in terms of being a criminal and hiding his crimes. And he would cover it up, but he got more reckless as his drug habit got worse. And then he had a girlfriend named Sadie McKnight, and she was pretty straight-laced. She didn't know anything about this, but she kicked him out later on because of his drug use, and that sort of really set him off. And he was ending up becoming increasingly reckless in the way he was killing this woman, and then they eventually caught on to him.
We're talking to Ron Chepesiuk about his book, Bad Henry, The Murderous Rampage of the Taco Bell Strangler. This guy in North Carolina kills between 20 and 90 people, right? And then you tell me, too, that he also had a drug habit. He's got girlfriends, and his only source of income is this Taco Bell working in fast food?
Yeah, and he started to kill some of the women for money.
Okay.
He thought some of them, they worked at Taco Bell. They were like managers. He thought they had access to the safe.
Oh, okay.
And he killed some of them for money, and this became essentially the main reason why he ended up killing him. Later on, he was desperate for money, and he would end up killing them. There's only one of the victims I think he killed for the sexual aspect of it. I think it was the first one,
Wait a second. Then you're telling me he did between 20 and 90 murders?
No, he didn't do 20. He did 11 that they know of. Now, he later on, when he was caught and everything, he tried to say that he would reveal some other murders that he committed, if they gave him a sentence, but they never really worked anything out. And I don't think he killed anybody else. I think
but 11 everybody. For sure. 11 dead women.
Yeah, 11. There's 11 victims.
And this is the 11 dead victims to cover up these petty armed robberies?
Yeah. Later on,
fascinating.
He ended up killing a lot of the women for the money. I mean, they had access to the safe at one of those fast food restaurants, or they had an ATM card. He tried to use the ATM card on a couple of them, and they had given him the false number before he murdered them, and he couldn't use them. In fact, that was one of the piece of evidence against him. They had him pegged after he killed Betty Wacom. He went to use her card, and it didn't work. And they noticed they couldn't make out the face of his, but they noticed the earring. It was a distinct earring with a cross, and they noticed later when they picked him up that he had the same earring on that. So that was the piece of evidence that connected him to the crime of the 11 women that he murdered.
All right. So you're saying they saw the earring in the ATM video? Yeah,
right. The ATM video on that then, and also he made another mistake. He took the car of Wacom and he parked it, and he thought he had wiped the fingerprints off, but he left a palm print on the trunk on that, and they had this. They picked that up in terms of evidence, and they checked it out and connected it to Wallace. And the other piece of evidence too is that they finally wised up, and they asked some of the relatives of the victims, who did the victim know, and they gave them a list of people that they knew who they would let into the house, who felt confident enough to let them into the house, who trusted them, and Wallace showed up in every one, and so that sort of
kind of a pattern, right?
Yeah, right. A pattern, right. So by then, this was like 94 in March, 94, and they decided to move in, and so that's when they arrested him. And surprisingly, he was arrested, and he wanted to tell everything. So he ended up speaking for 10 hours in interrogation with them, and it's quite remarkable. I got access to the transcripts, and it was quite remarkable how he described, the murders and motivations and all that sort of stuff. And he tried to his lawyers tried to get that suppressed later on at trial, but it wasn't successful. The judge allowed the transcripts to be entered into evidence.
Were you able to put any of those transcripts in the book, Bad Henry, Murderous Rampage?
Yeah, I used the for the pattern of the crimes, the pattern of the crimes. It was very useful, and he explained why he did certain things, and his motivation is the psychology of why he committed the crimes. Yeah, it was.
And what was his reason? Because I'm assuming that he killed them to eliminate witnesses to his stupid little robberies, right?
Well, I mean, like I said, the first victim, Carolyn Love, may have been sexual. He said that he was attracted to her in shorts and all that, but everybody else that he murdered, some of them, there was really no clear evidence. He ended up murdering Carolyn Love's girlfriend, Shauna Hawk, and he said he viewed her as a sister. He ended up raping her and murdering her. He dumped her in the shower, and her boyfriend found her. It was really horrific on that, and it really upset her mother on that sort of stuff. But there really wasn't for a lot of them any clear reason why he decided to kill him. I mean, he would walk into the place, they would let him in, and as soon as he turned it back, he'd jump him, and he had this thing called the Boston choke, a special way of committing strangulation, and then he would knock him out, and then rape them, and then eventually murdering them.
Just amazing, because there's plenty of guys out there walking around if they're doing...
Well, that's the thing. When I was writing this book, I was saying, God, how many... they say there's 50 serial killers walking around the United States anytime. That's what serial killer experts say. But I'm thinking, God, if they're half as bad as this guy, it must be really frightening, to to be a woman and meeting strangers and all that. I said it would really be upsetting.
Now, what about during his confession? Did he give a reason, a motive for doing these murders?
No.
Just explain how he did it.
Yeah. Explain how he did it. Like I said, he said that the first one he was attracted to her.
Right.
Another one he said he went in there and he needed the money, and he had every intention of killing her. And like I said, he got more reckless as the murders were being committed, because he was an addict. He was high on crack, and his life was falling apart again. His girlfriend had left him. He had given up his apartment. He was essentially almost homeless. Living with friends, and just really didn't. I think he really lost his sense of reality, and wasn't really realizing what he was doing. And when he murdered, he ended up murdering two women in the same apartment. Now, if that isn't going to get the cops in the case, right? What is?
Yeah.
On that sort of stuff. And but he was careful before that. But he was desperate for money, and just ended up killing these these poor girls.
Was there any kind of outcry in the city about, hey, listen, all these women are turning up dead and no one's doing anything about it?
Well, yeah. Eventually, the black community. These are all done in East Charlotte,
right.
Which is largely predominantly African American community, and they got on, and that these young girls were being murdered, and they were upset. Why weren't the cops making any progress in the case? And they started to accuse the cops of racism, that they weren't interested because they were poor black girls.
Yeah.
They weren't from the right side of town, and all that sort of stuff. And of course, the cops defended them. They tried to defend themselves, saying they're overworked, and they didn't have the resources, which was true. Charlotte was really growing at that period. It went from a town of about 400,000 to over 1 million, and everybody was coming there from the north and all that. And the resources of the city didn't keep up with the growth. And but there was so much outcry over the murders that about a year after Wallace was sentenced, they made some reforms. They added more police. The police went from like 7 or 8 to about 25. That sort of stuff. They got technology, new equipment, and all that, which helped them to investigate and solve crimes.
The city of Charlotte, North Carolina, only has 25 cops?
No, they had approximately seven cops investigating felonies.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Investigating felonies.
Okay.
And then they jumped it up, and like I said, there was 119 murders in 129 murders in 1993, and you figure that out, right? You do the math. That's how many each cop is responsible for. I mean, it's incredible number. And then they tried to, they knew the racial thing. The cops knew the racial thing was a serious problem, so they appointed a black former sergeant, Gary McFadden, to head the investigation. And he was competent, and it was probably the best thing they did in terms of the investigation. But I talked with McFadden, and he acknowledged that he was essentially set up as a fall guy. If something went wrong, they would blame this poor black police officer, for the lack of progress we made in the investigation.
So he's sitting in prison now. I'm assuming he got life, right?
Well, what happened was it took about 2 years, the trial. It was a sensational trial. The prosecution wanted the death penalty, and his lawyers tried to say that there was no deliberate intent on his part with the murders, and so he should not get the death penalty. He should get life and all that. And then they sentenced him, for the murders. There were some rape charges as well. Just a whole slew of crimes, and he was sentenced to death on that. Now, this was back in the mid-'90s, and the death penalty was still in vogue, right? But then eventually, as time went on, all these innocent people were being executed, and the public opinion started to turn against the death penalty, and so the governor of North Carolina put a moratorium on them, and he had actually exhausted all his appeals by 2005, and he's still there. He's still, 18 years later, he's still on death row in Central Prison in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Have you had a chance to talk to him?
Well, I thought about that. I talked with the editor or the executive producer of this show on ABC television, and they had done a documentary, and she had tried to get an interview with him, and he turned her down. And so I said, God, it's going to be a lot of time trying to get this interview. I've tried to do this before. And I said, it's going to take up an enormous amount of time. And I said, what's it really going to do for me? I had the ego trip of talking to the serial killer about the crimes he committed. But I'm saying, how much value is that? Because he's already explained it all, right, in the transcripts. And so I weighed, all that, and I decided I wasn't going to do it. So I got the book in early, about a month and a half in early.
Gotcha. Now, since the book's been out, any word back from Mr. Henry Wallace, whether he likes the book or not?
Well, it just came out, July 11th. So so it's only been like a month and a half. So I've gotten some good reviews and all that on Amazon. Some good comments from fellow authors. I sent the book out to get some review comments, and so it's still a little bit too early on that. And still, rounding up publicity, like you, for example, on that. And so, but I'm hoping that the book will do well. I'm planning to write a screenplay based on the book. I was going to try to get it optioned, but then one of my producer friends said, why don't you do the screenplay, because they're probably going to want their own writers if they option the book. And he said it'd be better for you, better money and everything. So I'm going to do that as soon as I get a chance, which might be 2 or 3 months from now.
How about like the true crime community? Like any conspiracy theories about this guy having accomplices or anything like that? Other motives?
No, it's a pretty straightforward case. No, there's no accomplices at all. He worked all by himself, and it's pretty straightforward. Case.
Any comments from Taco Bell Incorporated? Hey, Ron,
no, I haven't.
Take our name off your book there. No.
I don't know if they want this publicity or not. on that sort of stuff. But I was going to go by there. I was going to go by to the one near the former Eastland Mall, which has been torn down, the one he worked at, just to see what it was like on that. But I never did get a chance to do that. But he ended up working, and that's why I met most of these girls, and became friends with them. Like I said, it was just incredible double life. I mean, everybody I talked to said he seemed like the nicest guy, just really, really, thoughtful. He attended like 2 or 3 of the funerals of the girls.
Right.
And he met one mother, Dee Sumter, Shauna Huck's mother, a couple of days after, and it was just pouring his sympathy out to her, for the murder of her daughter and all that sort of stuff. So, and he ended up going to the funeral chapel and sitting there, and even on Carolyn Love, when she was murdered, she disappeared. He dumped her body on this side road, and they didn't find it 2 years later. But after she was murdered, he went with his girlfriend and a relative of Caroline down to the police to file a missing persons report. Just cold-blooded. Incredible
story here. Bad Henry, the Murderous Rampage of the Taco Bell Strangler by Ron Chepesiuk. You can check him out at ronchepesiuk.com. Don't forget, Ron Chepesiuk has a radio show every 8 p.m. on Thursday, Crime Beat on the artistfirst.com. Tell us about Carlos Later. I know you got this TV series just came out on VIX Spanish station streaming.
Yeah.
Pariso Blanco, What's going on with Carlos Later? He fell off the map.
Carlos Later is really an interesting guy. He's one of the most important figures in the history of the international drug trafficking. He was a member of the Medellin cartel, a partner of Pablo Escobar, the really famous gangster, and he pioneered the distribution method for the mass distribution of cocaine to the U.S. And it led to the big epidemic we started experiencing in the late 70s, with cocaine. He essentially operated on an island called Norman's Cay in the Bahamas, which is about 200 miles from the U.S. And before this time, the cocaine was usually transported on people. So you can imagine how many people it would take to transport a substantial amount of cocaine to the U.S. And he came up with this plan to use planes, and they would fly to Norman's Cay, refuel, get supplied with the materials, and then they fly into the U.S. And of course, in those days, there was no terrorism, right? Back in the late 70s, so it was easy to fly into the U.S. on these old runways, abandoned airports, and then the cocaine would be offloaded into trucks, and they'd be transferred all over the country. And he quickly made him a billionaire, and on that. And then he got kicked out of the islands about 82, the DEA put pressure on the corrupt Bahamian government, and he ended up back in Colombia, where he tried to organize a political party, essentially to fight thextradition. The U.S. are trying to get the Colombian government to pass an extradition law to have these drug traffickers transported to the U.S. for trial. And he organized this party. He had a little success. He actually got a couple of people elected to the government, and they ended up killing Rodrigo Bonilla, the Minister of Justice, which is a bad thing to do because the government came down hard on them, and they had to flee the country. They ended up in Panama under Noriega, who provided protection, and they got suspicious that Noriega was going to turn him into the U.S. For a deal, because he was being investigated for drug trafficking. So they left there and they went to Nicaragua, and eventually came back to the U.S. By then, later was becoming less of an important figure in the drug trade, and he was also using drugs and acting really crazy. He was an interesting guy. He was a neo-Nazi and a racist, really, on that, and he espoused the destruction of the U.S. He saw cocaine as a weapon that could help destroy the U.S. And he came to the U.S. when he was very young, and he had high expectations of success in the U.S. But it didn't turn out, and I think that turned him against the U.S. And he had this visceral hatred for them, and also for Jews as well.
What about any connections to like CIA or anything like that?
Well, that's interesting because when later was convicted, he was convicted to like life plus 155 years in jail and all that, and he disappeared in the witness protection program within the prison system, and everybody was speculating, these conspiracy theories, these crazy conspiracy theories, and I would get calls eventually from people that wanted to interview me or find out what I thought about that, and a couple of them thought that later was working for the CIA, which was really stupid because he operated before 1988, and any knowledge you would have prior to that time, how could it help the CIA today? You know what I mean? And that was because he was put in the witness protection program because they thought that he had threatened a judge. And so they put him. They took him out of this prison, and they whisked him away, and he disappeared within the so-called WITSEC program. That's the witness protection program for prisoners. And then he showed up in 2005, suing the U.S. government for a broken promise that they would eventually transport him to Germany. And he disappeared, and then there was rumors that he was going to be let out, and but nothing ever happened. And then one day, June 17th, 2020, he was on a plane to Germany, where he lives now. And how is he doing? I don't know. I told you. Well, there was this woman that came out with so-called book on Carlos Later. She claimed that she had collaborated with Carlos Later on this book, and this Colombian radio station interviewed her, and she was on the air, and she was talking about how she had collaborated did this book. And then he goes, let's find out what Carlos Later has to think about it. And Carlos Later showed up on the air, and he said he didn't know the woman. He never collaborated with her, and that he was going to sue her for her lying about collaborating on the book and all that sort of stuff. But on that show, he also said that he was coming out with a documentary later this year. He said it should be out by the end of the year, and he couldn't talk about it because the producer that's doing the thing has him committed to silence.
It reminds me of that story. That guy wrote the book about Howard Hughes. The same thing.
Howard Hughes. Yeah,
he got confronted with that. And I told you off the air, my friend who wrote that book. But it was kind of more of a stunt, a publicity stunt, when he was accused of not knowing the subject. That whole conspiracy theory about Carlos later came out because people discovered he was missing in the Bureau of Prisons database over the Chandra Levy case, right?
Yeah. So and conspiracy theories, people.
I love them.
They can't. Well, I don't because one of my books, Sergeant Smack, and it dealt with Ike Atkinson, and he was accused of shipping drugs in the bodies and caskets of American soldiers, and I did the book with him on that, promising him that I would clear that up, and I did. Although it appeared in American Gangster, the movie, and so when I started out investigating that angle, there were like 12,000 articles on the internet, and all of them said that that was true, that drugs are being transported on the bodies of American servicemen in Vietnam,
or at least in body bags to Fort Bragg.
Yeah, after I investigated, there was 8,000 word chapter in my book. After I investigated, I concluded this was crazy. It was absurd. There was no reason why. And then this reporter from the AP called me, and he wanted me to talk about that. And he had a preconceived idea that it was true. And he started arguing with me about the conspiracy theory. And I told him, I said, don't believe me. I said, I put him in touch with some of the people that I had interviewed him. I said, these people know, they were there. And then he wrote this article, and it was the first article to cast doubt on the theory. And interestingly, American Gangster, which was a pretty good movie, if you discount the cadaver angle.
Well,
it was a really good movie, and there's a good chance that it would be nominated for an Oscar and all that. But then all this doubt that started to appear about the veracity of the story, and I think that I may have had something to do with not getting nominated for an Oscar.
Yeah, but also too, I think the portrayal of Nicky Barnes. I think Nicky Barnes is way more powerful than those Georgia boys, who were a much smaller organization, as far as I understand. No.
Yeah.
They portray Nicky Barnes as some kind of
clown.
I would
say that, that, and also the way they portrayed Nicky Barnes, Cuban Gooding, played him as he was sort of a drug crazed,
like a clown,
and all that, and sort of a fool, really, but which is not true because he was a very smart,
very serious guy,
very smart gangster, right? And as far as who was bigger, I did the book on the biggest of them all, Frank Matthews, who disappeared with a paramour and $20 million in 1973.
And that's Sergeant Smack?
No, that's Frank Matthews. That's Black Caesar, the book Black Caesar.
Right. What about Sergeant Smack? Is he still around doing interviews? Is he alive?
Well, he passed away in 2015.
Okay.
And we did, we collaborated on that, and the book's available, of course. Anybody is interested.
Yes, Sergeant Smack. You can find that at ronchepesiuk.com. And
they go on Amazon and check it out.
There you go.
On that, then. Right.
And for people too, the way it's spelled Chepesiuk, it's a little unusual. It's Chepesiuk, but it's pronounced Chepesiuk.
I always tell people it means Smith in Polish.
Well, it's easy to find. An unusual name. It's easy to find. Let me ask you a question too. Now, the way we met was over that whole John Dugan thing. John Dugan said he was in Russia and he had those tapes of Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah.
Okay, and we had our little discussions about that. What do you think ever came of that?
Well, Putin invaded Ukraine, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm Ukrainian.
Okay.
And Dugan's beholding to Putin for staying in Russia because he fled the U.S. The U.S. government. They had a warrant for his arrest on that, and he could be sentenced to several years in prison if they ever catch up with him. And so we had sort of a parting of the ways in a way because I wasn't going to put up with that bullshit. With that the Russian government were right in invading Ukraine.
Yeah, he was like a spokesperson. He was in the bag for Putin for sure. But what do you make of his claims that he had those tapes? Because I think largely it's been debunked.
Well, I remember I told you, I said he showed me tapes,
right,
and it was sort of like spontaneous. It looked like actual a hidden camera.
Yeah.
In the room there was an old guy, young girl, and I only saw about 3 minutes of it and all that. He just wanted to show me on that. But a lot of people, questioned, his veracity on that. I've talked to other people, and they claim that he's totally BS on that.
And also, too, there's tapes out there that look just like Clinton, that look just like Joe Biden, that's or actors.
Well, now with artificial intelligence, right?
Oh, that's a whole other story.
It's almost impossible to tell the difference. And that sort of thing. But
just imagine video. We can't even trust video evidence anymore.
No,
no,
really.
Yeah.
I saw a show yesterday on 60 Minutes talking about scams.
Yeah.
And people using real voices.
Yeah.
And these elderly people getting scammed out of money at a bank. Because they believe it's true. They believe they're talking to the person that the voice sounds like.
Yeah, I was talking to someone the other day. I forget who it is right now. We were talking about video confessions, and we came up with the Central Park 5. That was the first time we ever saw video confessions, and they were showing little clips of it on TV, and it was like, oh, my God.
Yeah.
This is open and shut. It's open and shut. But now we can't even trust that. Now we can't even trust the video confessions.
No, and that. And, of course, we know what happened with them.
Yeah, it turned out, yeah.
They're innocent.
Yeah.
On that then, and so
But when you watched it when I was a kid in New York, you never saw a video confession before. You saw these kids, and they look like they were snarky and stuff like that. Like I was at the time. I was the same age, and but you said, oh yeah, of course they did it. Just unbelievable.
It's very unsettling times we're entering.
Yeah.
As a writer myself, they're talking about artificial. This big strike they have now with the screenwriters. It's mainly the big issue is artificial intelligence. Screenwriters, including myself, are afraid that they're going to use that to take away our jobs on that. And I've used artificial intelligence. It can be a tool on that. I still can't replace the human on that, but it's getting better and better. Every day. They're refining it, and who knows? Now, my big concern is, of course, Space Odyssey. Hell. Will they become smarter than us and decide they don't need us and sort of take over the world?
By then we'll be long and gone, man. Both those will be forgotten.
Well, yeah, but but we still got to worry about our legacy.
Yeah, well, good luck with that.
Yeah.
But what I was going to say is, and we were talking off the air about Elon Musk, and he wants to put a chip in your brain. The guy has a company to put a chip.
There's some that you put a chip in his brain for sure.
I can't got to find his brain.
On that. But so it's really. I guess you could say exciting times in a way.
Yeah.
But it's very, very high stakes, for a lot of people.
So let me ask you this, because you said you got 42 books, man. RonChepesiuk.com, you got the TV thing going on here. You got the radio show. What are you working on next? What big project are you working on?
Well, that's interesting. I'm waiting on a contract from a lawyer that is representing this gang leader from Chicago. He was a member of the Al Rukins.
Sure.
I don't know if you know who they are. They were really big.
Yeah, it's a great story.
Chicago gang. And he's related to Jeff Fort, who's in Florence, Colorado, in seclusion, there for life on that. And he wants to tell a story. Now, he's in witness protection himself in Whitsick, and he's been there for 30 years. And he contacted me out of the blue and asked me if I would be interested. And so I talked to him on the phone. I don't know where he is because he's like in witness protection. But I said, yeah, okay, well, we'll talk to your lawyer. And so he put me in touch with his lawyer, and I think we worked out something. I'll have to see what he's offering on that. But that's another thing. I'm working on a book now with a producer in Dallas on this individual that was in oil and gas, and he turned out to be a real con man, really interesting guy. And so I'm working on a book on that, and then I've got an offer to write a script based on a book, a heist, bank heist, and I'm talking to the people about that. But I never have any problem with work.
Yeah. Now, hard to believe someone in the oil industry would be dishonest. But you mentioned the O'Rourkens. Okay.
Yeah.
You mentioned the O'Rourkens. That's a fascinating topic, man. Now, that's that gang that were involved with the Moors and they had pyramids and stuff like that, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. He says that the story about him, the Gaddafi connection.
Right.
Where they're doing. They're going to do hits for him, in return for money and all that. And he says that's all BS. And that's as far as I know. We haven't really talked about it, but it's an interesting story. He said he spent time in prison with Nicky Barnes.
Yeah.
And he said he's got all kinds of stories. And
I'd love to interview him, man. That O'Rourke story is fascinating. That whole period, within Chicago gangs.
Yeah. And this guy. Has a good memory, and it's interesting. There's a lot of good stories in there, so it sounds pretty exciting. So I'm waiting to see what the offer is going to be, and then go from there.
No, that's great. And if you have a good memory, remind me about that when the book comes out. I won't have you come back because my memory is shot these days.
Yeah, well, I'll contact you about if you want, we could get. Jesus Ruiz and Awan. I did the book, The Real Mr. Big, on him. He was the biggest cocaine dealer in British history.
Sure.
And he was caught in 2003, went to prison in 2006, got out about 2008. We collaborated on the book. And, he had 20,000 people working for him, money laundering in Colombia. And he operated in Britain. He was the biggest. When he was arrested, the price of cocaine went up 50%.
Wow.
Because he had such a stranglehold on the cocaine trade.
Yeah, I've heard those stories. Ron Chepesiuk, we're out of time though, man. But get a hold of me. I'd love to interview him.
I thought we're just getting started.
Okay, I'll let when you're ready. Okay, RonChepesiuk.com. The book we talked about today was Bad Henry, the Murderous Rampage of the Taco Bell Strangler. We talked about his TV series on VIX, on Spanish TV, is a Paraiso Blanco about Carlos Later. And also, too, we talked about his radio show, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Thursdays, Crime Beat on the artistfirst.com. Ron Chepesiuk, man, thank you so much. You got a ton of information here, 42 books. Everybody go to Amazon and just look. You can find it easily probably by looking up Bad Henry, the Murderous Rampage of the Taco Bell Strangler, and then click on Ron Chepesiuk and see all of his books. If you listen to the Opperman Report, these are the kind of books you guys will love, man. These are all the topics we cover here all the time. Perfect stuff for black gangsters of Chicago, the Traficantes. Come on, this is all our stuff, man. Sergeant Smack, this is our stuff. Thank you so much, Mr. Ron Chepesiuk.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me, Ed. I really enjoyed it.
Always, man. Thank you. Good night.
Okay, thank you.